else today? What do we think?
Fine,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Definitely try something else?
Yeah.
Well, we can't
Okay.
care about every.
Yes,
you know,
definitely something else.
All
yeah.
right, so let's see how it goes. Worst comes to worst.
Whatever.
It doesn't work out. And then we jump back to Pirkei Avot the next time. But what I wanted to kind of talk about today is actually a book that I find particularly fascinating, which is called Shemirat HaLashon, which is a book by the Chafetz Chaim. And it's all about about Lashon Hara, and about the way that we talk and the way that we treat people and the way that we approach things like gossip. It's a really, really big fat book, but actually not all of it is the relevant text. And it's, I mean, this chunk is kind of like the rule book on the laws of Lashon Hara. And the other part is kind of other teachings all about Lashon Hara. But I thought at the very least we could kind of explore the beginning of it and see what it has to say. There's an idea that gets talked about a little bit at the moment, which is the parallel and the comparison between what we're experiencing in terms of social isolation and the what the Torah has to say about social isolation. I don't know if people are aware of this. We're going to read about it in the Torah portions in a couple of weeks' time when we get to Tazria and Mitzora. Daniel, would you just go and close that door, please? I don't know what people can hear. Yeah, maybe. I don't know what people can hear, but I can hear my kids having a Zoom conference in the other room. So when we get to Tazria and Mitzora in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to be reading about people that suffered from Tzorat. Now, we translate Tzorat as leprosy, but it wasn't really leprosy. It was different to that. Oh, what are you doing? We're getting there. You know, we're all on learning curves over here. Let's just get this up. No. Don't worry about that. Yeah. So the way that it used to work was that if a person got a particular kind of blemish on their skin called Tzorat, then they would have to be locked up and confined to their home for the space of a week. It was kind of like a white pigmentation blemish situation called Tzorat, and I always find it quite interesting that the word Tzorat sounds like psoriasis, because if anything, this particular leprosy probably looked more like psoriasis than it did look like leprosy. But anyway, so the rule was that they would go to see a Kohen. The Kohen would determine whether it was this Tzorat blemish or not. And then if it was, they would be declared tamei, they would be declared impure, and they would have to quarantine, and they would have to isolate themselves for a period of a week, at which point they would be inspected again. And if the spot or the blemish hadn't changed in size or color, etc., then they would be quarantined for another week, and they would still be impure. So that's where we kind of see that kind of quarantine and self-isolation in the Torah itself. And the reason why it's therefore relevant to this book is because people that were afflicted with... no.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. We could see you a minute ago as well. And
Can you still hear me?
we can, yeah.
Yay, hello everybody.
Now, shh, they're all trying to listen to me, Neil. So the reason why it's particularly relevant is because the Tzorat affliction in the times of the Torah and the times of the Jews living in Israel, the times of the Beit HaMikdash, it would have been on account of things like speaking Lashon Hara. and gossiping and slandering, that they would have been given this Shemirat affliction. So even though one cannot say that the cause of what's happening today is because of Lashon Hara, we can say that it's a great time to learn about Lashon Hara because of the fact that both of them have the connection of quarantining and self-isolation. So that was why I thought it would be fun to have a little look at it. Again, I am not drawing any connection and any parallel to the current climate and to what we're studying, other than the mere fact that they both have this concept of isolation attached to them. So I don't want people to come away from this and say, what did you learn in Lunch and Learn today with Rabbi Nick? And Rabbi Nick said, oh, well, coronavirus is happening because people talk Lashon Hara. That's not what I'm saying. That is being recorded. That is not what I'm saying. But nonetheless, it is a good thing to learn. It's a good thing to learn about always. But at least now I've got an easy way to justify it. So what I've got for you here is actually the text of the book that I'm using here. And the introduction is really quite interesting. Let's see if I can get it up on your screens. Now watch this, Neil. If it's been blowing your socks off so far, just you wait. What can people see? Hello?
Whoa, whoa.
Oh, there we are.
What are people able to see there? Hello? Can people still hear me?
That's clever.
Looks like there's something
Yeah,
wrong
we
with mine.
just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are people able to see what I've just shared on the screen?
Yes,
Gone.
Can everyone hear me?
it's gone.
Oh.
Gone.
I can
Yes,
hear you.
Yeah.
gone. The page is gone.
Yeah,
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you, but we can't see you now.
I can see you, but the page is gone.
Yeah, that's fine.
You come back. Okay.
Sorry, it just decided to kick me out.
Well, just read it to us.
No, I can
It's
share
just
it.
that.
Here it comes again. Have we got it now?
Yeah. Start. Yes. Yes.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's give it a go. So I've only got partial view. 1 second. There we go. So it starts off with the words Baruch Adonai Elohei Yisrael. Blessed be the God of Israel. Which, by the way, is quite a fascinating way to start this off. One of the things that we see, we're not going to go through the whole of this introduction, but one of the things that we see in this introduction, as well as in other introductions that you see in books of this nature, is how much emphasis they place on the fact that they're not just kind of making up the information that they're sharing. These books are not written as a way of kind of, satisfying their ego, getting their name out there, trying to make themselves famous on the back of the material they're producing. What you see is there's a certain level of submission and humility to God and to the Torah, and what they're doing is just kind of piecing together the things that they're learning and then sharing that with everyone. So it's always quite interesting to compare and contrast an introduction for a book of this nature and introductions of other books where it's all just kind of like, I am extremely qualified to be able to deliver this information because I have studied XYZ for a certain number of years, and therefore I am the best person on the planet to be able to give you the information that I present to you here. As you proceed through this introduction, he goes on to say how, all I did was I just took things that were already out there and I've just put them all into one place because nobody was doing this, and I thought that it was important. And if you've got any concerns or questions or things that you need to clarify, then by all means ask, and by all means explore them at your own pace and in your own way. So I find that quite a fascinating thing. Anyway, so blessed is the Lord our God, who has separated us from the other nations, meaning that he has selected us as being the worthy recipients of receiving his Torah. And he brought us to the Holy Land. Why did he bring us to the Holy Land? This is interesting. The Hebrew says, Kadeshin is kelekayem kol mitzvotav. He brought us to the Holy Land so that we can merit fulfilling all of his mitzvot. So what does that mean? What that means is the following. We know that we've got 613 mitzvot, but we know that some of them are applicable only to men, some of them are applicable only to women, some of them are applicable only to Kohanim, to Leviim, to and also when we have a temple, and also when we are living in the land of Israel. So what's fascinating is that we have 613 mitzvot, but it is impossible for one person to fulfill every single one of them. It's just not possible, because a person cannot be simultaneously a Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, a man and woman, living inside of Israel and outside of Israel, living at the time of the temple and not at the time of the temple. It's physically impossible for one person to complete all 613 mitzvot. So one of the important things, therefore, to realize is that we, as the Jewish people, are one being, one nation, one incredible, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. One homogeneous whole, an entity. That's an important thing to realize, and it's one of the things that they said. I don't like what I've just done there. 1 second. Let's do it again. All right. So that's what he said so far. Now listen to the next bit. His sole intention for choosing us, for giving us the Torah, for bringing us to the land of Israel for our benefit, kol kavanato, hi rak letovatenu. It's just for our good alone. In order that through the performance of these mitzvot, we can become holy to him. Which is a fascinating concept as well. What does this mean? He's brought us to the Holy Land. His sole intention for giving us the Torah, his sole intention for giving us the mitzvot, is that it's for our benefit, is that it's good for us. So what does good for us mean? Anybody?
Gives you hope.
Gives you hope.
Faith.
Gives you faith.
Raison d'etre.
A purpose for living. Just to all those who can't translate French.
May we, Rodders.
So
We'll feel better for ourselves, and also it will be better for God because we'll be more closer to God.
it'll be better for God if we do what he asks.
No,
Is
it's
that what
better
you
for
just...
us because
Better
we'll
for us.
become closer to God.
Very nice. That's a really lovely answer as well. You know, there's one
Could you
place...
repeat that? A bit fizzy, sorry.
Go on.
Could you just repeat that answer again, because mine went a bit fizzy when I said it.
Yeah, go on, Howard.
By doing mitzvahs, we'll be closer to God.
Okay.
I also got a bit of techno glitch there, but by doing the mitzvahs, we will be closer to God, and that will be better for us because it's good for us to be close to God. That's what you were saying?
Yes.
Excellent. So we see somewhere else this idea of it being good for you, being good for us. We see that in Parshat Lech Lecha. It's the first time that God speaks to Abraham, and he says, Lech Lecha, go for yourself, go to yourself. It says, go from your land, go from your birthplace, and go from your father, and journey to a place that I'm going to show you. And Rashi says on that particular verse, he says, what do you mean, lech lecha, go to you, go for yourself? He says it's going to be for your benefit and it's going to be for your pleasure. Now, what's the connection between that and this? So, Lech Lecha is not just a commandment for Abraham. He wasn't just telling Abraham that you have to go follow wherever I show you, listen to what I've got to say. That wasn't just a commandment for one person. That's a commandment that resonates throughout all of history. And what it means then is that when we follow these things and when we tune in to God, so that's for our pleasure and that is for our benefit. I'm not sure if I've ever shared this idea before, but if I have, it was probably with a completely different looking Lunch and Learn crowd. But there's a story that I like to share. It's not a true story, but not every story is true, but there's truth to every story. So the story goes like this: that there was a king, and this king had an inordinately large amount of wealth, and he wanted to be able to bequeath that wealth to his son, the crown prince. But he didn't want to just give it to him for free, so he set up a whole little situation. He was going to offer for his son to go to their private island where they've got their massive palace and they've got their, it's their Caribbean island with the private beach and, tennis courts and swimming pools and home cinemas and all that kind of thing. And he says to his son, the crown prince, go for a couple of weeks to this Caribbean island and, knock yourself out, enjoy yourself. So the crown prince gets on the private jet, he flies over to the private island, he gets off the private jet onto the land of the private island, and there he meets the butler. And the butler says to him, your father, the king, he wants you to have the most amazing time while you're here. He did just ask me to give you this list though, and he hands him over a list on which is written a whole bunch of different chores. And, it says clean the toilets every day and, change the bins, take the bins out and sweep the floor and, clean the windows, whatever it is. And he looks at this list. He's like, come on, I've got 2 weeks here. I'm not going to waste my time doing these chores. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to go jet skiing and I'm going to go paragliding and I'm going to do whatever else I want to do. So he enjoys himself, spends a couple of weeks on the island. And on the final day, he says, do you know what? I feel a little bit bad. Maybe I'll take a look at this list and see if there's something that I can do. So he looks at it, he goes, all right, you know what? I'll go and I'll change the toilet paper in one of the bathrooms. So he goes into the bathroom and he changes the toilet paper and he discovers that there's, 15 million pounds underneath the toilet rolls. It's like, oh my gosh, my father's left me 15 million pounds here. And what was unknown to him was that actually at every single one of these chores, his father had left a little bit more of his wealth. There was 15 million here, there was 30 million in the bathroom, there was 20 million in the kitchen for washing the dishes, whatever it was that was on the list of chores. Whatever it was that was on the list of chores, they'd also left sums of money for him to enjoy. So he's like, oh wow, I've got 15 million quid, that's amazing. So he goes home. Just 1 second, please.
Kids who'd have them.
Only parents. See, live television with a rabbi and kids. What a combination.
Proof that we are not where we shouldn't be and we are all at home. So he calls up his father and his father says, oh, so how was your trip? How did you get on? And he says, oh, I had the most amazing time. I went windsurfing and jet skiing and paragliding and it was amazing. And by the way, Dad, thank you for the 15 million pounds. And the king says, 15 million pounds? I don't understand. I left you 60 billion pounds. What were you doing all that time? So, needless to say, the relationship was not the strongest that it could have been. Now let's explore this story a different way. But before we explore the story a different way, please just give me 20 seconds to close the door.
And to tie up the children and gag them, put them under the stairs.
Just you're sitting on your tropical island.
The private island. It's
Where are
amazing.
you, Neil?
Where are you? Michael Sugar, where are you? I can see the trees in the background blowing.
He's
the
on the
wind.
Caribbean
garden.
island.
It's our back garden.
Oh,
When we did the extension, we wanted a water feature.
Both Michael and Paul are on the Caribbean island with $60 billion. Anyway, so let's explore the story in a different way. Let's say that the Crown
but
Prince gets...
They got the dollars, I got the toilet paper.
Worth more.
So let's say...
probably worth more.
Yeah, that's right. So let's say now the Crown Prince gets off the plane, he comes down the tarmac, he sees the butler, and the butler says to him, here's a list of chores that your father wants you to do while you're here. By the way, just so that you know, he's left a sum of money under each and every one of them. And at the end of it, you will have inherited your father's entire fortune. So now how do you think the guy's going to spend his 2 weeks?
Doing the tasks.
Doing the chores, yeah.
He's going to go at them. He's going to understand that, you know, what really counts is the treasure hidden beneath every single one of these chores. And at the end of it, he's not going to care that he hasn't had all of that time to go ice skating and banana boating and
ice skating on the island, on a Caribbean island.
yeah, well, it's synthetic ice, obviously. And all of the other amazing, you know, abseiling and parachuting, whatever else he was going to be doing for those 2 weeks. He doesn't care that he hasn't been able to do them, because actually what he's got is all of the wealth that his father wanted to give to him. And then when he comes back, you know, he calls up his father, the king, and his father says, how was your trip? He says, oh, Dad, it was amazing. Thank you so much for the 60 billion pounds. I can't believe you've been so generous. I can't believe you've given me such a reward. End of story. So the idea is that when we're told that the purpose of giving us the mitzvot is for our benefit and for our pleasure, it's this kind of idea. We can look at them as like a list of chores that we have to do, or we can understand that hidden within each and every one of these opportunities is going to be a huge amount of goodness and greatness and reward and bounty that Hashem is trying to share with us. And so we can be put into this world for 120 years or however long Hashem decides that we should be given. And we can say, you know, like, I want to spend all the time abseiling, and I just want to have loads of fun, and I just want to do everything that I want to do. And as for the list, well, you know, so I'll give him a bit here and I'll give him a bit there. So, you know, that's one approach. But what we're being taught here is that there's latent value and a storehouse of treasure, not just in the world to come, but also in this world as well. It's for our benefit as well. It's for our goodness as well. The mitzvot that we've been given are designed in a way to benefit us here as well as to benefit us there. Now, that doesn't mean like a Coke machine. I put the money in and then I get my reward. That's not necessarily what we're saying here. But the benefits that are available to us, the healthy lifestyle, the spiritual lifestyle, the giving lifestyle that comes about from trying to do only good deeds and trying to only connect in that way, that's for our benefit here, and it's also for our benefit in the next world as well. And plus, you know, as we see in this introduction, it makes us holy too. So everyone's a winner. Okay, where does anyone have any questions on that before I oh wait, no, actually let me mute Paul before I ask if anyone has questions.
I'm waiting for Paul.
Yeah, we're only two lines into the introduction at the moment anyway. So where are we? So he brought us to the Holy Land so we can do the mitzvot. His sole intent was for our good alone, so that through this we become holy to him. Then it brings a verse, Leman Tizkaru, which we say in the Shema. V'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim le'Elokeichem. Just shows us that we're supposed to remember each and every day that by doing the mitzvot, we become holy to good. And by doing so, it will be in our power to receive the effluence. Oh, what a word. Effluence. I have no idea what an effluence is. But in Hebrew, it's
the time with matzah.
Pardon me?
You get that at Pesach time with matzah.
It's spelled differently. It's spelled F-L-A-T-U.
Okay. I'm
So effluence in Hebrew, it's called the hashpa'ah, which is kind of like the divine flow of His goodness and His loving kindness in this world and in the world to come. As it says in the verse, what does the Lord your God ask of you? Only to keep the mitzvot of the Lord and His statutes, which I have commanded you on this day, to do good unto you. And what do we mean by to do good unto you? So that's what we've been talking about. The benefit of these things is ultimately ours to enjoy. So that's just the opening lines of what is said. If we skip a little bit further down to part 17, because all of the stuff that he's saying here, he's bringing different sources and different ideas. But this is what the next bit that I wanted to share with you. So he gets to a point where he wants to understand. Don't forget, by the way, we're talking about Lashon Hara, because we're kind of like completely sidetracked over that. So after going through a few different areas and sources where we see Lashon Hara being talked about, and in which he talks about how bad it is, and all of the different things that it causes, and all these different bad things. So he asks the question. He's kind of talking and conversing, as it were. He says, I wanted to understand why it is that the negative commandment, meaning the fact that we are not allowed to speak Lashon Hara, why is it so insignificant in the eyes of so many people? So if I was to pose that as a question, right, before we go on to see what he goes on to say, why is it? Why is Lashon Hara so insignificant when we see sources in our Torah talking about how, the second temple was destroyed on account of baseless hatred, and the way that we talk about each other and the way that we treat each other, and we can see that so much gets damaged on account of the way that we talk about each other. If we just pause for a second to reflect on that, because we're not talking about rocket science over here. If we say something bad to another individual who happens to be the person's employer, let's say someone goes and talks to Jonathan Calms about Rabbi Nick and says something incriminating and damning about me. Not that there's anything to say, it's an impossible situation. I'm just asking people to try and picture such a thing. But let's say that they go and talk to an employer about one of the employees, and as a result of that, the guy loses his job. Might not have been true. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't true. But out of one kind of careless, gossiping sentence, a person's entire life could be ruined. So he wants to understand, why is it that it is such a prevalent thing for people to talk about each other, for people to gossip about each other, for people to potentially ruin people's lives, to ruin people's marriages, to ruin people's relationships? Why is it, therefore, that we see it in such abundance across the world? What do people have to say on that? It's all gone quiet over there.
Gone quiet.
Please just let me have a little drink and then I'll carry on.
It's human nature to talk and discuss things amongst each other, especially ladies, and because men are too busy working. They don't necessarily mean harm, but while they're talking, they can say something inadvertently that causes a problem they didn't realise was going to happen.
Gary has very kindly offered to speak Lashon Hara about an entire gender.
Any other ladies out there to stand up?
I think a lot of people say things because it's in some ways maybe it's an insecurity and they want to feel better or more feel more important, so they like to try and knock people down, and I think that's a terrible thing, but it's what happens.
Yes.
That gets mentioned at some point. I can't remember where, but
I think people enjoy gossiping.
They do.
And I think this encompasses what we're talking about. You gossip about people without realising the harm and or damage that you can possibly do.
And if you take it bring it into the modern day, with all that goes on Facebook and social media, it's got horrendous. Terrible.
Yeah. I mean, in Facebook, it's even worse because then you've got the written word, and once you write something down, it's impossible to take it back.
Yeah, once you got something online, it becomes almost impossible to delete it again.
Yeah.
Even if you remove it from your feed, it gets stored somewhere by some government in some place in some massive archive of servers. It's always going somewhere. It's a very scary thing. It's a very scary premise. And all of the things that you've been mentioning, by the way, they all do get picked up on. Are we seeing Richard Gilbert somewhere?
Yes.
You sent a message. Hello.
It just said hello.
Hey! Richard Gilbert, we were just talking about you.
Of course you were.
No, we're just having a look at the introduction to the Chafetz Chaim, talking about Shemirat HaLashon, God protecting our speech. And we're up to this point over here. I think you can see the screen share, where he says in his introduction, I'm trying to understand this. Why is it that the prohibition of speaking Lashon Hara about people, why is it so insignificant in the eyes of so many people? So he says he thought about this for a long, long time. And he noticed that it's not just the average layman that it affects, but even some of the greatest Torah scholars could still find themselves violating the finer details of forbidden speech. And it's interesting what he says. He says you got the common people, okay, that's people like me, who maybe don't even know that the prohibition of Lashon Hara applies to things that are true as well as to what is untrue. Some of us don't realize that. We could say, I saw Bob doing X, Y, Z, and we'll think that actually it's not terrible to share that because it's true. Lashon Hara is only about things that are not true. But what we actually see in the laws of Lashon Hara is that's not the case. Speaking unkindly or unnecessarily about a person, even when it's factually accurate, can still be halachically problematic. So he says, not only do the wider world, as it were, talk like this, but even people who are well versed in the laws of the Torah, and they know what a problem Lashon Hara is, and they know that it's forbidden, and they know that Hashem doesn't want us to be doing it, and nonetheless they still do it. So he says that would seem to be on account of a very strong Yetzer Hara, very strong evil inclination that tries and directs us into speaking in ways that we shouldn't, and this voice inside our head says to us, the thing that you're trying to say, that's not Lashon Hara, that was meant about someone else. Over here you're trying to, it's a mitzvah to say the thing that you want to say. It's not a bad thing. You're trying to alert people and warn people about people who are bad and people who are deceitful and people who are evil. That's not a problem. And what can end up happening is that you start using your brain to justify all the different reasons and all the different ways in which what the thing that you want to share is actually permitted. Even though if someone else was to say something, you say, hey, don't talk about this. I don't want to hear it. It's the wrong thing. But when it comes to us, so our brains work in different ways, and the things that we want to share are all of a sudden very, very important and very true. And it's a mitzvah for us to share these things. These are all the processes that could go through a person's mind, which is quite a fascinating thing. So we see that there's really two reasons, perhaps, why it's so prevalent. Either because we just don't know what the rules are, and so we talk and we don't realize that what we're doing is the wrong thing, or our brains and our Yetzer Hara inclinations are so good at convincing us that we think not only is it not a problem for me to say what it is, but it's actually what Hashem wants from me to talk like this, which is astounding. So it's a fascinating concept, and it's one that really, we can reflect and we can think about how bad it is, the types of information that gets shared. Obviously
Rabbi,
there are,
if this is so important and such emphasis is placed on it, why was it not one of the 10 commandments, which really, although we're not saying any one commandment is more important than another commandment, at least the 10 commandments were something that we can focus on and understand. This wasn't even in, this whole concept wasn't in the 10 commandments as such.
That is somewhat accurate, except for the fact that we do have things in the 10 commandments like not bearing false testimony.
But you're saying even if it's true, you shouldn't say it.
Pardon me?
You're saying even if something is true, you shouldn't say it. And
so the 10 commandments are not like the 10 most important things that we have to do. The 10 commandments are kind of the broad headings, 5 of which are about the way in which we interact with God, and the other 5 about the ways that we interact with man. But the extensions of all of those things, Lashon Hara certainly would come into play. So for example, we have a commandment in the Torah, in the 10 commandments, that we're not allowed to kill people, right? And if we learn enough about the topic of what we can say and what we can't say, so we have a halacha that we're not allowed to embarrass people in public. And if we embarrass people in public, it is akin, and it is almost identical to having killed them, right? The Talmud talks about it says if you whiten a person's face, I think words to this effect, if you whiten a person's face, it is as if you've killed them. Meaning that if you embarrass a person and they're in public and their face goes completely pale on account of the shock and the embarrassment, so you've drained all of the blood from their face, and it's the same thing as if you've cut off their heads. So actually, even though it might not necessarily say in the 10 commandments, thou shalt not speak Lashon Hara, the connections and the parallels are drawn throughout all of our literature and throughout all of our teachings that connects all of these ideas together. If you go and embarrass a person in public, the Talmud says that is as if you've gone and killed them. So that it's not written explicitly, but again, it's something that we become more in tune with and we become more aware of. The more that we study, the more that we learn, the more that we talk about these things, it all helps to paint a clearer picture.
You could also see it as coming under theft, because you're taking away somebody's good name.
Yeah.
Very good point as well. And if you one could also connect it to the problems of being envious and being jealous. If you use the opportunity to say things and talk about why does he get to have that and I don't? Why is that fair? Right? So we could be violating that commandment through our speech as well, perhaps. It's one of those things that we see is so far-reaching. In fact, the actual the book of the laws of Lashon Hara. Okay, there's all the halachot, and it's possible to violate. I'm just trying to find the exact number. It's possible to violate 17 Torah prohibitions, and it's possible to miss out on several more positive commandments. I thought I had a number somewhere, but just by speaking one sentence, one could end up violating several, well over a dozen different mitzvot in the Torah, because as you go through this, and it talks about not placing stumbling blocks before people, not talking badly about orphans, and not talking badly about widows, and not denigrating kohanim. So as you go through it and you see the different mitzvot in the Torah that it impacts, if you slag off someone who is a kohen, who is a widow and an orphan, and who whatever the example is, you could be encroaching and violating a significant number of mitzvot in the Torah just by talking about someone. So it does have far-reaching impacts beyond just the Ten Commandments.
But you can say nice things. Say you see somebody doing something nice, and you repeat, and you say a nice thing. So that's talking about them, but it's a nice thing. So
you could be getting loads of mitzvot for doing that. For spreading the love, one could be doing some wonderful things through that.
Because you're repeating something that you saw that was not someone doing something kind.
But not everything is forbidden. Not everything is forbidden.
That's true.
If we're passing on anecdotes which can help people understand the right way to behave, for example, I'll give you an example. When a person goes to a funeral and delivers a eulogy, and they talk about how charitable and how benevolent and what an amazing parent they were, these things are not Lashon Hara.
No.
In fact, it's the opposite. We're telling these stories in order that people should learn from the actions of those individuals to learn how to be better. So there's a lot of positivity that can be brought about through the way that we speak as well.
Yes, I'll just put it up.
So there's that element to it as well. This is, it's easy, especially when I've been trying to go through this book for some time now. It takes a while, and it's easy to go through it and say, like, I'm just going to stop talking. That's the safest way, isn't it? And that way I know that I can never violate anything and never get it wrong. But actually, the story is told of the Chafetz Chaim, who was the rabbi who wrote this. I didn't speak enough about him at the beginning, but Yisroel Meir Kagan, who lived in the late 19th, early 20th century. He died in 1933. He lived in Poland, and he was, the master of Lashon Hara. No, he was the master of Shemirat HaLashon. He was the master of protecting his speech. And the story goes that because people didn't know what he looked like, so it wasn't like big posters and flyers on Facebook and that kind of thing. The story goes that that someone went to visit his town, and they went to visit the Chafetz Chaim, and they saw him talking to a rabbi. He didn't know which one was which. The guy didn't know which one was the Chafetz Chaim and which one was the other guest or the other rabbi. So the attendant that was there said, okay, well, look at these two people here. Tell me, which one do you think is the Chafetz Chaim? So he sees one rabbi sitting there, very, very quiet, very pious looking, kind of very attentive. and he saw the other rabbi speaking really animatedly and really kind of no holds barred. So he turned to the attendant and he said, well, surely the Chafetz Chaim is the quiet one because he's so careful about his speech that he just doesn't talk. And the attendant said back to him, no, it's actually the other way around. He's so in tune with the things that he can say and the things that he can't say that he can speak freely. And he doesn't have to worry because he knows that he's not going to say things that are forbidden. So a person that trains to think about the things that they say, it shouldn't hold us back from talking. Precisely the opposite. We should feel more comfortable to speak and feel more at leisure to speak because we've internalized the message and we've considered the impact of our words and the negative damages that can happen on account of the way that we speak about people. And so it's actually possible to speak freer, knowing that we're only speaking in permitted and acceptable ways. So one shouldn't feel like they have to stop talking and take a vow of silence.
Everybody, if you took a look at what's happening, from politicians all the way down, look what happened with Brexit. It was horrendous. All of this, how everybody was doing everybody down, And I think maybe with what's happening now, people start thinking a bit more differently. Maybe, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
I would certainly like to hope so, and I'd certainly like to think so.
Well,
are we as a people being as selfless as we can be at this time?
Yeah.
Do you think so?
Oh, sorry. What? I didn't realise that was a question. Say it again.
Are we as a people being as selfless as we can at this time?
Selfless? Oh, 100%. Do
you think so?
Not everybody.
100%.
There's always room for improvement.
Mm.
When you say we as a people, do you mean humanity or do you mean we as a community
As
here?
Jews. No, as Jews.
As Jews.
Yeah.
Oh, whoever said there's room for improvement, there's always room for improvement. But I'm completely bowled over by the way in which people in Bushy have taken up arms, as it were. There are hundreds of people who have been galvanized and motivated to help and to volunteer, which is absolutely incredible. So it's.
I understand there are 100 volunteers, and I was the lucky recipient. The first morning, a lady, very nice lady called Amber, called me to see, because I'm on my own and I'm getting older, if I needed anything, and I did need something, which she went to Waitrose for me, and I was very grateful.
Well, there's one person on this conversation who's blushing at the moment.
Oh, is that?
Because Amber's Paul's daughter-in-law.
Ah, well, she was very lovely, and I was very grateful because my daughter's husband has the virus, and she can self-isolate.
Oh, really?
Come out.
Oh, wow.
So I had no one to
Okay, Rabbi, can we complicate this slightly, please?
Oh, go on,
Yeah,
Paul.
who's that? Gary?
Okay. Yes, very so. So I've got problems when it comes to wanting to say something, and I'm thinking, is it Lashon Hara? Because one, I understand that Lashon Hara is only truth. If it's a lie, it's not Lashon Hara. It's a different crime. And if it's in the public domain, then it can't be Lashon Hara because it's known by everybody and it's a general thing. So if you're talking about a politician or an author or something like that, it's not Lashon Hara because it's in the public domain. But what if you're intending no harm whatsoever? For instance, I saw somebody when I was out walking the other day, and I was wanting to tell people that I'd seen this particular person. Now, is it Lashon Hara if I tell people that I've seen this person and it turns out he wasn't supposed to be there? He's supposed to be self-isolating, and I'm telling people that I've seen him out. But I only told them because I was proud to have seen him and pleased to have seen him because he was an important person. That's one thing. And then, no, okay, I'll leave that with you.
So that's a difficult thing to answer because what you've done something or you've said something which you could not have reasonably foreseen the consequence that happened, right? Because if you could reasonably foresee the consequence that happened, then perhaps it could be, something that one should avoid saying. So, you know, if what happens on account of your speech was unavoidable, and you could never have dreamt in a million years that that there would be a detrimental outcome to sharing the thing that you wanted to share, then, you know, how could you be blamed for that? But, you know, the particular details in order to answer that question will be based on things that we haven't yet really had a chance to explore. Certainly not from this material. There's all kinds of criteria that as you go through it, you start to understand the types of questions that one should ask themselves. Such as, you know, am I trying to share this information because it will be bad for someone else, but it will make me feel good? Am I at risk of, you know, damaging their relationship with somebody? There's all kinds of things that one is encouraged to think about before they go and tell someone about it. But this particular example doesn't sound like, you know, you would have been contemplating that such a thing could happen from saying it. So difficult to say that is something that should have been avoided, really. Certainly without a bit more wider, some of the wider details. But also, you were mentioning before about things which are in the public domain. So, you know, that's something that we haven't necessarily discussed with this yet, but there is a concept that we see of when information is publicly available and everyone knows about it, then there are instances where it's okay to discuss these things. But again, even then there's caution, because are you really just sharing these things because you want to get one up on someone else? Or are you sharing it out of, you know, more kind of, not selfless, but more
altruistic
reasons? Thank you very much. What a word, altruistic. So all these things, there's plenty more to explore and plenty more to analyze. And maybe we will do that next. What day is it today? Next Tuesday. So
have a good day, everybody. Be well.
So that'll be lunch and learn next Tuesday as we think about continuing. All right. I'm going to stop the recording here.